we've got a weight problem.
Yeah, not me, no. EVs, they're a bit heavy.
But fortunately, there is a company that think that their pancake-shaped motors could squeeze out 200 kilos of weight from an EV, and they're leveraging 200-year-old tech to do so.
Yeah. So I first came here 15 years ago when I almost had a wind-up film camera. Well, not quite, it was a VHS tape video camera.
And I came to visit them when I did a piddly third-year engineering project on one of their segments.
That's much better than me. Anyway, for regular viewers, you will know that we have come back to see YASA Motors, not in a little building where they're developing it, in a massive factory where they're producing 25,000 motors a year.
So we're going to have a little closer look, and this is the Everything Electric Tech Show.
Our 3 free YouTube channels on EVs and clean energy tech are funded by our fun-packed test drive-tastic events in the North, West and Greater London, and our events down under. Next up, Everything Electric heads to Harrogate and then Cheltenham. All events include a B2B EV day and commercial vehicles too. And now, back to the episode.
So look, before we start, Imogen, I need a science lesson. I need the simplest explanation of the difference between the big motors I know, which look like a watermelon thing that are in most cars now, and these incredible machines.
Okay, I will do my best.
Yeah.
But I reckon there's 3 things that we need to remember.
Okay.
Sausage rolls,
Yeah.
party rings, and Michael Faraday.
Okay, Michael Faraday I'm with, sausage rolls, party rings I'm less familiar with, the little biscuits with the hole in.
Little biscuits
Okay.
with the holes in. Now, the underlying principles of most electric motors is exactly the same. You've got a spinny bit, the rotor, and a stationary bit, the stator. Feed 3 phases of electricity into the stator and you create a rotating magnetic field. And as that field sweeps past the rotor, it induces a current. And when current flows inside a magnetic field, you get a force. Force becomes torque, torque becomes motion. And this whole principle all goes back to 1831 and Michael Faraday, an English physicist. And it was his law of electromagnetic induction which tells us that a changing magnetic field induces a voltage and in a closed circuit, a current. In an AC motor, the constantly rotating magnetic field means current is continually induced in the rotor, producing torque. And this is where you may remember Fleming's left-hand rule. And today there are 2 main motor architectures. Radial flux is the familiar cylindrical shape, rotor in the middle, stator wrapped around it, magnetic field flowing outward. Think sausage roll, sausage rotor, pastry stator. And axial flux, in which the stator sits between 2 rotating discs and the magnetic field flows axially, more like stacked party rings. And in fact, Faraday's first machine, the homopolar generator, was indeed axial. But industry favoured radial designs because they were far easier to manufacture at scale. So axial flux just faded away, until companies like YASA revisited it with modern materials, modelling and manufacturing.
And that's what they're making here, is axial flux motors. Wow.
So 200 years on, and this is where we are. Can you give us the 101, just so that we're all up to speed? Just how good are YASA motors compared to a radial motor equivalent?
The big breakthrough we made with the topology, and this was enabled by this 2-rotor axial flux motor, is that we don't need this magnetic yoke, which is there to transport the flux in the stator of a radial machine. If the flux is passing straight through the stator, you can completely remove that yoke, which is maybe 80% of the stator iron, which is maybe 70% or 60% of the entire mass of the machine. You just throw out immediately. So just that one simple idea was a massive breakthrough in electric motor design. Then when you combine that with some of the cooling technologies and the manufacturing technologies we've developed and all of these incremental improvements we've made over the last 15 years, we've been able to demonstrate that we've been consistently about a 3-to-1 ratio better in terms of power density than a radial machine. Now, this isn't to say radial machines have been static. They've improved maybe a factor of 20 in the last 15 years. So we've had to match or do better than that to stay competitive. And so that's maybe what an outsider to the industry is probably less aware of, is just how much the technology has improved across the board, whether it's batteries, power electronics, radial motors, axial motors. Everyone has had to up their game on a year-on-year basis. Otherwise you become uncompetitive very quickly.
But it is weird, given that the first example of an axial flux motor was in 1831?
1820?
1821?
Yeah.
So what happened? Why wasn't it the sort of given topology that we see today?
Yeah, and this is a really good question. I mean, fundamentally, laminations, which are these, you can roll sheets of steel and you can punch them with a relatively simple press, are two-dimensional in the sense that you can stack them up and make a three-dimensional shape, but it's of the same surface area. And that makes a brilliant radial machine. So radial machines are based off laminations, and then over years we developed more and more complex windings to go around those laminations. But that is the fundamental building block of all electric motors. Our electric motor, the YASA topology, was only really possible when new materials like soft magnetic composite were created by companies in the 90s and the 2000s. And this enabled us to press three-dimensional shapes, which you can make with laminations, but they're incredibly expensive and difficult to do so. So really that was the biggest change, is new materials came on the market that enabled axial flux machines to be made, which really they were much, much harder to do before those new materials existed.
So a little stock take. A YASA axial flux motor is around 20% of the depth of a traditional motor. It is also a quarter of the weight, and because they've got rid of the yoke, they can get 3 to 4 times the power density of an equivalent radial flux motor. They have proven earlier this year with a record-breaking prototype that they can get 1,000 horsepower from a motor that weighs just 12.7 kilos. And because the hot bits aren't buried in the bowels of a motor, the cooling can be super elegant as well. But I think the real magic comes in the weight spiraling. Because this machine is much lighter, that means that your batteries can be smaller, you've got less wiring, and ultimately that could strip out 200 kilos from an electric vehicle.
In 2021, Mercedes-Benz acquired YASA to pursue super high-performance, lightweight powertrains for their future electric AMGs. Now this Oxfordshire super factory is scaling to 25,000 units a year. The tech is also being used in electric flight. The spin-off Evolito, which we visited when we covered the world's fastest plane, is now powering everything from vertical aerospace's Velo eVTOL to giant airships. From an Oxford lab to the world's fastest cars and planes, this is really a rather brilliant bit of British engineering.
So this is the entrance to the production area. I can see.
New factory. Come and have a look.
Oh my God. Oh my Lord. Wow.
So this is like a 42,000 square foot building.
Wow.
I think when you visited us before, it's probably about 1,000 square foot.
At the most,
At the most.
So you're 42,000.
Yeah.
You're 42 times bigger now.
42 times bigger. And we basically did a big factory reopening about a year ago.
Right.
Filled the plant with really modern production equipment, traceability, new controls.
Right.
So to make the products just really reliable in manufacture. You know, if any piece of kit goes down now, we've got duplicates. So
Right.
to really give our customers a product that they can guarantee they get every day, on time, to the right quality.
Right.
And that's a real journey to get there. You
Yeah,
can't
I
just
bet.
turn a factory on.
But also then you couldn't buy, we want a winding machine that manufactures different sort of electronics. They're not going to work for you. You needed specific.
Exactly. So initially we had to design all of these machines to make our motors.
Wow.
Of course, they were a bit crap, or
Right.
you know, they were made by
Yeah.
you know, engineers as prototypes. But we got a big investment last year to basically redo nearly all of these machines to a really high production quality
Right.
level. So we've done a lot of work behind the scenes on making all the machines to make the machine,
Right.
and that's taken a lot of money, a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible though.
So we start with the coil winding, and the unique bit of the process is we're bending the copper in the direction, the flat direction it doesn't want to go. So
Because that is like a flat strip of. Oh, there you go. There's a good example of it.
This is
It's
thinking, yeah.
A little flat strip of copper that I know would bend that way quite
yeah.
easily, but bending that way
Yeah.
makes
So
no sense. How you've
takes
done
a lot
that.
of controls and
Yeah.
development to get a good quality coil.
Wow.
These then get built up into what we call poles. So
Right.
we've got the iron segment, some insulation, and they get impregnated to form a solid building block for the
Right.
motor.
And that, so when I think of other electric motors I've seen, there's huge amounts of copper winding around enormous lumps.
Exactly.
And this is so.
That replaces that, yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
all these that go around the
Exactly.
thing? That's all the copper you've got in the motor.
So that
effectively.
you're holding, that's 10 kilowatts, 14, 15 horsepower of coil in your hand. Yeah.
If you think of a 15 horsepower petrol engine,
Yeah, exactly.
it's a bit more complicated than that. That is extraordinary. Wow. And how many of these are in the motor? Or it depends on the size.
It depends, but typically 12, 18,
Right.
something like this. Yeah.
Wow. So we've seen all the things, the little windings now in one. What do you call that? A cassette?
Yeah, they get built into a cassette,
Right.
and we've got all these wires around the outside. This
Right.
is what we call the lead frame, and then we have basically a welding machine
Right.
that comes and puts about 5,000 amps through the joint. You'll see a little puff of smoke come up, and that basically makes really robust connections
Right.
within the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's
And I mean, to do that by hand, what that's doing now would be. It wouldn't be. You couldn't do it. Basically.
It's horrific, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all done with robotics, vision systems,
Right.
so really high quality, really high repeatability.
Right, yeah.
And it just means that you get a very reliable product. It does checks that the resistance is correct when the weld is done. So
Wow.
it's got in-process checks as well.
So that's doing that at the same time.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow, that's incredible.
Okay, so this is an example of a final assembly test cell
Right.
where the finished stator is being put in that big housing, which
Right.
is there to bolt the two halves of the car together, transmission on one side, engine on other.
didn't know that.
And
Wow.
so this is the one being used in the Ferrari Stradale.
Wow.
And essentially, once we put the motor in the housing, then gets the rotor put on, packaged up, and end-of-line tested.
Right. So this looks a bit different. Is that more than one motor in there?
Yeah, that's right. So as you can see, there's a badge on it. This goes in the Lamborghinis, the
Wow.
Temerario and the Revuelto. So both
Right.
of them have this torque vectored front axle. So that means we've got two electric motors
Right.
going to a gearbox each, and they directly connect to the wheels
Right.
to drag it around corners, help with the braking.
Wow.
So very similar technology that we put on pure electric vehicles.
Yeah. So they got. So it's combustion engine driving the rear wheels. So these aren't connected to a combustion engine.
Exactly.
They're
Yeah.
separate.
Pure electric front
Right.
axle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's power? That's got to be a lot of power.
Yeah,
that they can-
these are about 110 kilowatts each motor. So you've got about
Right.
220, so that's maybe 280 horsepower on the front axle.
Wow.
And when people have driven the car, the journalists have reviewed it. This has a huge impact on the drive and the feeling of the vehicle.
Because you're not pushing those wheels forward. They're pulling you They're pulling you around the corner. Effectively,
Exactly that. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Lamborghini. Never thought I'd see anything for a Lamborghini.
I know.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
What's going on here? This looks like you're testing the motors here.
Yeah, so this is our end-of-line tester. So
Right.
all of the different products we make go through these three stations to measure the key characteristics of the motor. It's the when you spin it very slowly, you can measure a little bit of torque ripple. That's called cogging torque. So
Right.
we're measuring that very accurately. Then we spin it up to high speed and we measure the vibration and the acoustics. And then we spin it again at low speed, putting very high current, like up to 1,000 amps, to measure
Wow.
the torque ripple at high current.
Right.
And basically, those three stations tell us everything we need to know about the motor.
about the motor,
If they pass all these tests, we go, it's a good motor,
That's a good one.
ship it to the customer.
Right. But then the whole way that it's the motors are moved, that's completely automated. Is this
Yeah.
this is the machine you built here? Is it?
This is one of the machines that YASA built to build the machine.
Right.
And it's still going. It's done maybe 80, 90,000 tests.
Wow.
And it's still going
Right.
strong.
Turning our heads towards the future then, it feels like there's two major opportunities when it comes to axial flux motors. The first is the compounding effect of other weight savings that you could make in a vehicle.
Yeah.
And two is the potential for in-wheel motors.
Yeah.
So I guess starting with the first one, how can the weight savings kind of accrue if someone was to use an axial flux instead of a radial flux motor?
There is this fascinating mass compounding or decompounding effect, which is roughly about a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you can save a kilogram from a subsystem, be it a battery or a motor, that will cascade around the rest of the vehicle to another kilogram of saving, because a lighter motor means it's a bit more efficient, few less cells, smaller brakes, the chassis gets a bit lighter, then you need less torque in the motor, and it keeps decompounding around until, if we save 100 kilos on the motor, that can save another 100 kilos on the vehicle. So you're starting to talk quite big savings. Where it gets even more significant is where you can affect the architecture, and that comes to the point of in-wheel. And I think that's where, as an engineer, I always get quite excited when you can leverage the benefits of the technology to do something quite extraordinary. So with our latest technology, we've been able to prove that we can essentially match the power density of a carbon ceramic brake disc. So carbon ceramic brake discs they use in Formula One, sports cars, they're up at an astonishing 50 kilowatts per kilogram. In other words, with a 14 kilogram carbon ceramic brake disc, you can make 650 kilowatts of braking power. It's only for very short periods and it all gets thrown away as heat. But we said, if we could match that from an electric motor technology, and a few years ago, as we saw our power densities kind of creeping up, the thought process is, well, why do you need brakes anymore? On a sports car, if you can collect that energy as regenerative braking rather than heat, you basically double your range on the track. So now it may take a number of years to fully get there because the batteries aren't there, the EVs are too heavy, and some other limitations. But we're on this journey where we're going to collect more and more regen, brakes are going to get smaller and smaller. And this in-wheel technology that we have basically enables us to no longer need the brakes for normal braking. You need them from an emergency stop. So you need a little lightweight, maybe 3 kilo disc. But for any other track driving, right up to kind of 1.5 megawatts of rear axle braking, which is for top end sports car, we can achieve that electromagnetically now. Now the batteries aren't quite there yet, but again, this is a journey. We're in the 1920s of electric cars, right? So 10 years, and I think we'll be seeing vehicles with 100% regen on tracks, maybe even less than that.
That is absolutely phenomenal that really this unlocks the opportunity to completely change a vehicle's architecture and design cars in a totally different way.
The interesting thing is that the mass decompounding spiral just accelerates, because instead of needing a huge 120 kilowatt, 130 kilowatt hour battery pack, you suddenly only need maybe 70. And so not only are you taking huge amounts of weight out of the chassis and the battery pack, and the motors all get smaller, the whole vehicle weight will come down by not just a 2-to-1 leveraged effect, but it could be a 4-to-1 leveraged effect. So suddenly you're going to see high performance sports cars which are at the kind of weight you would see in a competitive ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle.
Well, that was a pretty amazing day, Imogen. I mean, that was incredible to see what they've been doing here.
It is unbelievable. And do you know what? You often drive past these industrial estates across the UK and you have no idea that this is the magic that goes on inside of them.
No, it's really busy. And what really thrills me is that, this is we've seen quite a lot of companies, startup companies that haven't quite made it. YASA are the absolute opposite of that. They've done better than he expected. They're doing more than he ever dreamt 10 years ago. I saw them 15 years ago with one little motor in a little shed, effectively. And now look at it, 25,000 a year, British engineers with these machines going all over the world. I mean, it's a story that we don't often hear in this country.
It's amazing. Such a great example of fantastic British engineering. And I think after this, we need to set a date for 2041 for our episode 3.
You do the ending. I need to lie down.
Well, that is all that we have time for.
Yeah.
As ever, please do like and subscribe. And
if you have been,
thank you for watching.